Good morning from beautiful Brisbane, Australia, and welcome to CPtsd TV. Welcome, Conscious Warriors, this morning and to another episode, and where we're going to learn some very, very vital information this morning to our recovery process and to building our process into our life of conscious decision making. My apologies, I'm very late this morning. Unfortunately, I had no choice in the matter, but I'm here now and let's go today. Thank you for your patience this morning. I want to share some information with you this morning that I've only just come across, and with the help of science, I've been able to put together an ebook for us on this information. And with the ebook, I've also included a new chart I've discovered for us to help us identify where we are with self-regulation as well. So as we're aware, when we're able to self-regulate more effectively, then it helps us get through our triggers as well. So I'm just going to put the link in the comments for you for the free ebook with everything that I'm going to talk about this morning in it, so that you're able to follow through, because it is a lot of information to absorb all at once, and I didn't want you to miss out on it, especially because we know that our memory is very challenged at times, and that's because of the complex PTSD and because we remember things in a different way. Our brain takes things on board differently. Okay, so what I came to realize was that one of my challenges in recovery from childhood developmental trauma was understanding that my decisions in life have been made from a very naive space. So I was able to sit back and take a look and say, hey, I can see that I've been really, really responsible throughout life. So I've taken on a lot of responsibility, not just for myself, but for others from a very young age. So for me, things had happened like I was 7 and my brother was 6 in a class behind me, and he was very upset in class one day. So rather than ring my parents, they called me out of class and went to sit there and be with him and walk him through that scenario at 7 years of age. So that was something that happened a lot for me, was a lot of personal responsibility at a very young age. And, you know, my mum would leave me at home with my brother to look after him before we even went to school, you know, while she had to duck out to the shops and things like that. So I grew up with an innate sense of responsibility, believing that that gave me the ability to make a really healthy decision. But what I found out was, as I did the recovery process, that didn't happen. Okay, so as I got older, my decision-making process didn't improve any. Okay, so I'd make the same decision, not realizing with people, not realizing that I didn't have a full set of information. Now, being naive refers to a lack of experience or sophistication. So the noun naivety often refers to the kind of inexperience that allows us to be tricked, okay? But it can also refer to a trusting, innocent, or a lack of maturity. And even though we had so much happen to us in childhood, we can still come out with this naivety, this trusting of other people, and we need to be able to understand that that's happened because of childhood developmental trauma. Okay. Good morning, Ali. Sorry I'm late. So science has shown that soldiers who are naive will more than likely come back from assignment or to war with PTSD. And when I heard that, I went, my goodness, science knows this and that, and no one's applied it to complex PTSD yet. And I went, that changes everything in this area for me. And I went, well, and why? What's the one bit of crucial information that's going to change things for me? And I realized that the answer is evil. And I went, now let me explain, because when I first thought about it, I went, oh my goodness, I have trouble even saying the word evil, or the concept that there's evil in the world. And why? Why would I have a hard time saying that as an adult, especially when we've experienced evil against us? And the thing is, for us as children, it's impossible for us to imagine or to believe that evil, the exact opposite of love, resided in our own homes, our own environments, okay? Because as children, our minds, so we come born with the primitive part of our brain, aiming for our physiological needs to be met. So our food, water, air, shelter, sleep, safety needs to be met. That's all that part of our brain is looking for. And for love. Love is something that we know that we need, and it's wired into us in that very early stages. We're vulnerable, we're innocent. We need somebody, an adult, to provide us with all of these things, okay? Now, as we grow, and remember our still face experiment video where the baby's there and the mother's looking into the baby's eyes and the baby's happy and they're connected and it's the baby's gurgling away and reflecting the mum, and then the mum looks away and comes back and has a blank look on her face, okay? And the baby notices the immediate change in the mother's face and it gets distressed, okay? And it starts doing everything, even though the baby's nonverbal, it starts doing everything it possibly can to get the mother's attention and becomes quite distressed when the mother's face doesn't respond. Now, when we've gone through generations where there's no talk about emotions, okay, where we learn by example to shove those emotions down because it didn't mean we were going to get attention, and that's just one thing. We weren't going to get certain needs met, then there's no way on earth that we're going to be able to come through life. And there's a whole developmental process in the brain, okay, where we can believe that evil exists, that we won't get needs met, because if we believe that, it's living in our own home and we may as well curl up and die, okay? That's a very basic understanding of what was going on for us. So we didn't believe that we can't. I know for me, I didn't grow up believing that people could be innately evil. Now, I'm not talking about, we've got murderers living in our home. This is generally speaking across the board. That, sorry, I'm pretty emotional about this because it's really hit me hard how much I've walked through life not understanding that things like emotional abuse, financial abuse, mental, physical, sexual abuse, how evil they are when they're inflicted upon us or around us in our lives. Okay? Now, that's a big thing to take on board. So remember, just go back in and you can get all this information in the book. So what happened was, when the penny dropped that there is evil in the world, as in, I'm not naive enough not to believe that there's a lot of evil, big things, grand scale evil things that happen, like the Holocaust, world wars, okay? History repeating itself. But when we bring that down to our home environment, to start believing that people didn't have our best interests at heart, it really does hit us hard, okay? And it was something that was out of our control. Right? We had no say in any of this. So once I started to view the world with the possibility that evil exists, i.e. people aren't operating with optimum truth, with integrity, with love and a desire for wanting the best outcome for myself, I began to see the world very differently. Okay. And so what does that look like? And it's very simple, actually. It's not a case of walking around in fear, okay? Because our greatest strength comes from in hope, believing, having hope and wanting to build a better world, all right? Wanting to help other people, want to reach out. There's a great strength in there. So it's not a case of walking around in fear like I used to have to do years ago. I walked around in fear of everything. So I tried to control everything and everyone within my vicinity. You know, this will be the outcome. This is the way we're going. All right. There was no negotiation will be entered into. So what does this look like? So Nick and I were watching Netflix the other night, and in a show where a young man who was innocent was actually going to court to be convicted of murdering a young girl. So we're watching it all unfold in front of us. And there was a lawyer and a barrister involved in the young man's defence. And Nick said to me, that lawyer doesn't have the young man's best interest at heart. You know, he wasn't looking out for him, which is what his job was to do. His job was to, you know, collect evidence and understand the process, the legal process, what was going on. And he seemingly wasn't making decisions in the young man's best interest. And remember, the young man was innocent. And the barrister also wasn't making the best deal for the young man. You know, this is his life. We're talking life and death here. Could spend the rest of his life in jail if he's convicted of murdering this young woman. And it's like us. When we're growing up, it's life and death if we don't get emotional nurturing for us. I mean, we already come through with our sense of self not developed. So with other parts of us not developed and fully connected at a neurobiological level. So we need this understanding. And Nick said to me, neither of them are acting in his best interests. However, because I took a step back and viewed this situation differently, that evil exists, I asked myself, who has the best interests of the young man as a priority? And I said to Nick, the lawyer actually will fight for the young man and the barrister doesn't care at all. And that's the pivotal question we need to be looking out for with other people too, all right? Do we have somebody in our court that's going to fight alongside of us in life, that's going to stand up and take charge, and not of our lives, but in life, to be a conscious warrior, to make conscious choices about where we're going, to gather all the information, and it's a real internal job. It's not something that we're going to see automatically in people. It takes time for somebody's character to unfold in front of us when they're new, okay, when they're new into our lives, all right? So a part of our recovery has to be the willingness to own our own capacity for evil, okay? So to own our own capacity for choosing a less than our brightest path in life, all right? Our own capacity to choose manipulation, to get what we want, to get a need met, instead of choosing honesty that we can actually meet someone else's needs, or we can ask for our needs to be met. And this is a process, because one of the things we don't want to admit is the evil, the darkness, the temptations exist within us, because as children we saw what it did to adults who didn't have our best interests at heart. They were so wounded that all they could focus on was just getting through life and meeting their own needs. Well, they couldn't even identify their own needs a lot of the time in my situation. They just went through life unconsciously, on automatic pilot, and kept making the same mistakes. One of the individuals in my life has already been married and divorced 5 times. So if we're doing the same thing the same way and getting the same results, then we need to be having this internal look at ourselves and asking ourselves, what's happening here? What aren't I owning? What aren't I looking at and admitting within myself? All right? And we've got to be willing to do this. If we're not willing to do this and have an internal look and own our capacity for doing something that's outside the best interests of everyone around us, then we are going to have the same patterns repeatedly in our lives, okay? So one of the things that we need to be able to admit is when we're wrong, okay? We need to be willing to say, I could see I could have made a better decision. I could see I could have said to you, this is what I need, instead of having a meltdown and a whole drama scenario unfold in front of us. We've got to be willing to say, I'm sorry, okay? Look for people who will never admit they're wrong, all right? Because they're living in a whole different reality than what somebody who's conscious of the next 5 steps of the decision they make will be, all right? So if we're willing to say, okay, I'm going to make a conscious decision about my behaviour right now, I want to know what the next 5 steps are, what's going to unfold, and if I can't see the next 5 steps, then I need to be willing to sit down and work it through internally with myself. So how are we going to recognise when someone else is not acting with our best interests at heart? So their integrity is not on par, their ability to be truthful, well, it's not very existent. And we want to know this because we have to be willing to go, right, sorry, I just need to take a breath. Okay, we have to be willing to ask these internal questions, because if we don't, then we will repeat the decision-making process that we've done in the past, and we will have the same things happen over and over again. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the next sheet to come up for you. All of this is in the book because I don't know why this isn't coming up. Okay. So, what does this look like? What are some of the questions that we can ask? Because we need to do this to know that we're being a safe person, all right? So we're being safe for others around us who need to feel safe too. And we need to do this internal process so that we can gauge whether other people are being safe, all right, for us. Because one of the most important factors of us being able to go into recovery is understanding that when anxiety gets triggered, when the depression trigger goes off in our brain, when so much else happens at a neurobiological level, that our first need is to feel safe in our environment, to feel safe in our body, to feel safe, to know intrinsically that I am safe. All right, so I put together some questions that you can ask, and they're all in the ebook, okay? So I want to look at, in my conversations with people, am I being invalidated? So is the person I'm talking to completely ignoring how I feel in this situation? Are they listening to my input? They don't have to take my input, all right, because that means I'm back in fear and trying to control things. But are they listening, and am I being heard, all right? Or are they saying things like, yeah, they're giving you the message that you don't matter, that your opinion doesn't matter, that what you have to say doesn't matter? Is there a sense of dismissal? Okay, we know, and dismissal is very, very crushing internally for us. If somebody just dismisses us, and I had this happen before Christmas, where somebody said to me, oh yeah, I can see what you're doing and how it's different to me, and this is what I do and this is what you do, and I felt very dismissed. I wasn't part of the conversation. It was like I wasn't even there, and I went, yeah, this is not happening. So I had to, fortunately I'm that far along in my process that I could be triggered, but I was able to still think very clearly and pause and stop and say to them, well, no, I'm sorry. That's not what happens for me in my process. So as we go through this, we're able to be aware of what somebody's actions are, even if it is at an unconscious level for them. All right. And we are able to do this, especially when we've come through childhood developmental trauma in our own family, because we spend a lot of time observing other people and what's happening for them internally, in order that as a child we know how to keep ourselves safe. All right, so now we're taking that and turning it around as an adult. All right, we want to ask, do I feel invisible? And when it suits the person, am I invisible? All right. So people can have us in a situation where we need to be part of a decision-making process, but it's like we're not even there. They haven't considered us. And as a mum, this can happen. All right. Sometimes, not for me with my kids, we all know I love them and they're gorgeous and great, but we went through a stage where they just turn up and sit down and start talking to me. There was no connection and no understanding that I have work to do. I'm sitting here working and I've got to get on with it. And it was like I was just invisible. And there was no adult conversation about what I needed, what they needed, etc., etc. And so I had to be willing to speak to them about what was happening for me. And as we negotiated the process, that's when you know that you're with safe people, because you can have these challenging conversations. Am I feeling forgotten? Like if somebody just doesn't message you in response and doesn't even acknowledge that they'd seen your message and so on and so forth, and this happens consistently, and you're feeling like you're forgotten, then they're not a safe person. They're not operating that you are a valued member of society at the bare minimum, let alone that you're a valued person in their life. All right? So you need to be able to move on from that and get into a space where you're feeling safe. All right? Do I feel ashamed? So do I feel like I don't belong on part of this conversation? And we need to ask ourselves questions around that as well, because shame is not just about other people, and it can be about us feeling that we don't belong because of what happened with us, and we need to be willing to do our internal work as well, because we've got to be able to speak up, all right? And using our voice is something that's very, very challenging for us. Is my reality ignored? Is there no interpersonal connection that I matter? All right, so these are all things that as we go into adult relationships, it can give us clear indications about whether we're safe and whether this person operates from a place of value and integrity and that other people matter, all right? Now, we have to be willing to identify our needs at any given point in time and meet those needs. So if we're running around assuming that everybody's going to operate on our agenda all the time, then we're not doing this in a conscious manner, okay? We've got to be willing to have conversations, to check in with each other. Even yesterday, I said to Nick, would you be able to come shopping with me? He said, Mum, I'll just say no. You need to tell me what you need, that you need me to come shopping with you. And I thought about it, and I thought, yeah, I've got to learn to change my language around. I need to be able to be strong enough and say, this is what I need, okay? And if I'm telling him what I need, then he can say, yeah, I can meet that need, all right? And this is having adult conversations instead of not intentionally manipulating someone, because sometimes we can, but it's being willing to step up into adulthood in a whole different way that we never ever saw as an example, to be honest. So our language matters so much as well. So, and we need to be willing to build love into our own lives. Fall in love with life despite the challenges we've faced. Okay? Fall in love with the joy in the small moments, all right? Consciously bring that back into our day-to-day life. Make it a choice that that's what we do, so that others around us are able to do that as well, and realize we're going to make mistakes, all right? But we need to be willing to see that often people don't operate with our best interests at heart, all right? And it's not about taking responsibility for everyone and everything. It's about being willing to communicate what's happening for you to people who operate with a very healthy level of integrity. We need to accept that as we continue to say no to people who are emotionally unsafe for us, it builds our inner core emotional strength. So we experience that we are safe to identify unsafe people, and we are safe to keep moving on with our lives. And more people will come along where we practice this all the time. I know that's a lot of information to take on board. That's why I put the ebook together for you, because wrapping our mind around it does take time, and it does take language. It does take us to be willing to own when that fear comes up, just the thought that evil could exist and that it was around us as a child. It does take on a whole different vision of life, all right? And we're very wise to do this, okay? All right, I know it's a lot of information to wrap our minds around, but feel free to ask me any questions. And we're not looking at people who are innately evil and go out and going to create Holocaust Mark II and things like that. We're looking at people that we want around us who are conscious with the choices they're making and are willing to take responsibility for the choices that they're making, and the same for us, that we're providing a safe environment and we're willing to take responsibility for the choices that we're making as well. Have a gorgeous day, and I will see you tomorrow morning. Remember, you are loved. Bye for now.